All right, so characterization. That's what builds a character. So, what is characterization? The long definition is the traits that describe a character physically, mentally, and socially, and the character's motivation. So basically, that what that means is if I ask you to tell me about a character, whatever you use to describe what they look like, how they think, how they interact with other people, how they talk, the reasons they do the things they do, all of that is part of their characterization. It's what makes up a character. So, as we study this story, you need to think about what is characterization and how does it make up this character? How is this character described? So there's two types of characterizations. There's indirect and direct. Direct is usually the easiest one for you to identify. Direct's when the author directly describes the character. That's how it gets its name. So Jennifer had long, beautiful hair. Sam was a really nice guy. We see it, they tell us right there. That's a direct description. Indirect is when the author shows us something about the character through their actions, their interactions, their dialogue. This is stuff that requires you to make an inference. That means they don't give you all the information, but you can figure it out based on what they give you. So, one example could be Raina laughed when the girl tripped over the bag in the hallway and hurt her arm. Now, all it tells us about Raina is that she laughed. But we can piece it together. We see that Raina laughed when a girl tripped in the hallway, which maybe other people would laugh. I would say it's not very nice, but the girl's clearly hurt and Raina's thinking it's funny. So maybe Raina's not a very nice person. So the author doesn't say Raina's a mean person, but it tells us that she's laughing at people when they get hurt. What about Michelle donated all of her Christmas money to the local food shelter? It doesn't really tell us anything directly about Michelle, but we know that for many of us, if we got Christmas money, we would want to buy stuff for ourselves. But she's giving it to other people who need it more. So maybe she's a very generous and kind person. Those are indirect characterization. Round and flat characters. Round characters, this doesn't mean the way they look. It means they're complex, they're realistic. These are unique characters. These are usually the main characters, the person that you know the most about, and probably that you can relate to the most because the author has developed who they are the most and given you the most description to make them feel realistic. Flat characters are the opposite. It means they're one dimensional. You don't really hear much about them. They're kind of like these background characters that help out, but they don't really, we don't know a whole lot about them, so we can't relate to them. Sometimes they are created purposefully for one scene or one event. We have to have something happen so that we can understand more about the plot or the round characters. And then there's static and dynamic characters. Static characters are characters that never change throughout the entire text. Think of it like static on a TV or the radio where you hear shh and the wavy stuff and it never changes. That's how you remember. They stay the same. They are the same person from beginning to end. Nothing happens. Dynamic characters are quite the opposite. These are people or characters that have some sort of change throughout the story. They start out as one person, something happens, and their whole life changes. It could be like a bad guy realizing that he's got a problem and that he's a bad person, and he becomes a good guy by the end. So, how about Despicable Me? Gru. It's a perfect example of a dynamic character, right? He starts out as a bad guy, he realizes the error of his ways, he becomes a good guy. Meanwhile, the minions, while important characters, are probably static characters. They're just goofballs all the way throughout the story. So, static and dynamic characters can be main characters or not. Um, it just depends on the story and what we're hearing.